So this here is going to be a painting video for the Infernal Master. So that's the new model for the Thousand Suns that came in the Hexfire box. We just got him painted up now, and if you like the way he looks, or if you're looking for a way to paint yours, then feel free to follow along the guide here, and you'll see how we painted him up. If these kind of videos help you out and you kind of are interested in that, then please feel free to leave a like or a comment. Let us know what you think, or even subscribe to the channel. We'd appreciate that. Otherwise than that, stay tuned and we'll show you how we painted him up. So this here's our painting video for our Infernal Master. And what we did is, the first thing we did is we base coated him with a MECHANICUS standard gray base coat. The other thing to notice is we've got him as a sub-assembly. So his head and his body are not attached to the base, which is here. So we're going to paint each of these pieces differently, only because we wanted to be able to access the underside of the cape, which you can't do once it's on the assembly, because you can't have access to the inside of the cloak. So with that said, we do want to unite them as soon as possible, so we're going to start with the inside of the cloak. So our first color we're going to use is going to be a base coat of Rakarth flesh, which we're going to do all the underside of the cloak here. We'll probably do some of the front tabard here as well. So we'll do both of those and be back here in a few moments once we're finished with that. But it's basically just going to be a couple of thin coats just to coat the inside of the model here. And then we'll go from there. So this is our model now that we finished with the Rakarth flesh. And as you can see, we've done all the gaps inside of the cloak, as well as behind this arm here as well. And then we actually touched a little bit behind this part over the shoulder here. So we got inside of there, just in case if you're looking from a different angle, you will get just a tinge of the white color there. So with that done, we're going to add a shade to that. And our shade is going to be some Seraphim Sepia, which we're just going to put a good solid coat in the space there. And we're going to use it straight out of the pot. Don't worry if you make a mess, because we're painting over everything else in a few minutes. But you just want that to settle in there. Pool down at the bottom. And just fill the crevices and cracks so you get a little bit of depth there. So this here's the model now that the Seraphim Sepia is dried. We also came forward and did the tabard in the front, which we had missed earlier. So with that done, what we're going to do is add a dry brush layer to that of some Screaming Skull. So we're just going to lightly dry brush that right over the front and over the high points of the cloak. And be back here in a few minutes once those are done. And we'll see what it looks like. So this is our model now that the Screaming Skull is finished. And we like how it looks so far. We've got a nice high point, and then we've got some darker shades in the recesses. But I think we're going to bring it a little bit whiter still, because this is Thousand Suns. And everything looks sacred there. And so the brighter and the whiter it is, the better it will look for them. So we're going to take one last dry brush of White Scar, a very, very light one, because of course the brighter the white, the less paint you need. And we're just going to lightly brush that right across all of the tabards here, as well as just the high points on the cloak, just along probably the leading edge and the corner here. So we'll do that now and be back in a few minutes. So this is our model now that we finished with the White Scar. So with that, we're going to finish with the tabards and things for now. And we're going to move on to the armor itself. Now we have two choices here. We can do the armor in blue and then add the gold trim. Or we could do the armor in gold and then come through and fill in the blue spaces in between. We're going to do a combination of both, because in many cases, the leg is pretty much solidly blue, as well as this space in here. The feet are blue. However, this shoulder pad here is pretty much gold with just a blue circle, so we'll probably just do the circle there. This arm is going to be blue with just a little bit of gold trim, so we'll do the blue first. But for the most part, we're going to be doing the blue and not minding if we tramp over any of the other areas, because we'll come through and clean those up later. So with that, we're going to start with some appropriately named Thousand Suns Blue. And we're just going to start with 2 light coats just to fill in all of these solid areas, as well as any of the other areas that we're going to put blue down the road. So we'll do that now and meet back here in a few minutes. So this is our model now that we finished with the Thousand Suns Blue as a base coat. And as you can see, we've colored in areas that are later going to be yellow, as well as some of the gold. But we did get a nice established base of blue down. So what we're going to do now is add a dry brush highlight to that. That'll give us a little bit of an edge highlight on some of these armor plates, as well as some of these lighter areas here. And we're going to do that with maybe an Ahriman blue, because Thousand Suns. So we'll do that now, a very light layer. We do want the Thousand Suns to be the base and to show through, but we'll very lightly dry brush this blue over that, catching the shoes and then all of the armor plates, the fingers, things like that. So we'll do that now, and then be back here again in a few minutes. So this here's our model now that we finished with the Ahriman blue. So what we've got now is a bit of a two-toned appearance of the blue. As you can see on the backpack here, there's some lighter areas and then some darker areas, especially along the edges here. So you get a little bit of an edge highlight coming on. The other thing I think we're going to do is start working on the trim here. So that's all of these areas, all the chaos trim along the legs, along the shin pads, along the arms, along the elbows and things like that, as well as the bottom of the shaft and the head of the stave here, and then the backpack, of course, the incanters as well here on the backpack. So we're going to do all of that with the base color of Retributor Armour, and then we'll go from there, probably add a shade and then a couple of different layer colors. So we'll do those now, and that'll really make the model come together, because you'll start seeing the 2 colors. So this is our model now that we finished with the Retributor Armour, and as you can see, we've cleaned it up quite a bit, and it's really sort of popped out at us. As an aside, in doing that and seeing how easy it is for the gold to cover the blue when it's painted, and how easy it is for the blue to cover over the gold to fix mistakes, I think if I had to do it over, I would probably do the gold and then do the blue over the top, because it's much easier to keep clean. But in any case, this is what we've got when we finished here, and our gold is now done. And so what we're going to do now is add a shade to it, just to bring out some of the detail. So we're going to use a Seraphim Sepia again, and we're just going to paint that lightly into all of these areas, and it'll fill in all of the gaps and make the details pop out at us. And then we'll be back in a few minutes to do a dry brush highlight over the top of that. So we'll do that now and be right back in a moment. So this is our model now that we finished with the shade. And as you can see, we've made it more of a warm gold color. The shade is a bit of a red-orange. So the entire gold color has shifted off into more of a warm tone. So what we're going to do now is add a dry brush over the top. And we have a few choices, and I think we're going to use a little bit of all of them. So we've got some Stormhost silver here, and that'll make a nice white gold. We'll do that on probably the eagle skull here, the Zangor skull. And then we probably do this on this sort of this badge over here as well. So we'll probably do that, maybe even hit the eye, not sure. Then we can also use some Runelord brass, and that's going to make a more of a brass colored gold, or a faded yellowish gold. We'll probably do that on a couple of these stripes here, maybe on the shoulders of the backpack, and maybe on the Illuminati symbol here, maybe this piece here. And then we can also use some Liberator gold, which is more of a bright gold color. We'll do that on sort of the shaft of the hilt, and over here on the head of the staff, and then probably all the other gold around, just the generic gold, just to brighten up that as well. and hopefully the slight subtleties will stand out and make the model look a bit more complex. So we'll do all those now and be back here in a few minutes, and you'll kind of hopefully see the difference between each of the colors. So this is our model now that we finished with the highlights of the gold trim. And as you can see, we have a few options here. So the skull here was done with Stormhost silver, so it is the brightest out of all the choices. And then the pauldron over here, as well as the badge here, was done with the more redder version, the Runelord brass. And then the rest of it was done with the Liberator gold. The one up here was done with the Stormhost silver as well, so it's definitely a little bit brighter. But all in all, you can see the different tones of the different golds in different spots of the model. So that really brought out the base layer of the Retributor armor to give you some different options, and you can play with it any way you like. So from here, what we're going to do is clean up a few of the other little pieces before we move on to another color. We're going to do the bones of the horns here, as well as the tassels coming down. These are all cloth, similar to the underside of the cloak here, and then this is just bone. So we're going to do those with the same colors we did before, and there's another set of tassels here, as well as the handle of the staff here. So all that's going to be cloth-like. We've done these colors already, so it's just an easy repeat. We're going to do the Rakarth flesh, followed by like Seraphim Sepia shade, followed by a Screaming Skull highlight over the top. So we're just going to do that now, hitting these tassels just to lighten it up. And then we'll be back here again in a moment, and we'll move on to a different part of the model. So here's our model after we did the horns and the tassels and the grip for the staff. So with that, we're going to move on to another item. Now, I think what we're going to do next is the eyes, just because it's easy to do, because this is still a removable part, because once we glue that on, it'll be a little tricky. We'll probably also hit the gem up here as well. And what we're going to use for those is a base of SYBARITE green, and then probably just a lens flare highlight spot of GAUSS Blaster green. So we'll just sort of touch the eye lens once we've got the base done. And then same thing here, we'll do the whole gem here, and then we'll just sort of add a GAUSS Blaster highlight here. So this is our model after we finish with the SYBARITE green and the GAUSS Blaster green. And as you can see, we did the eyes, as well as the gem on the staff, and the eye on the chest, as well as the one on the foot. So with all that finished, we're going to move on to a couple of other little things we have to do. We're going to do the coils for the respirator here, as well as all of the machinery in the backpack back here. So we're going to do that in a metallic color. And so what we'll do with that is a little bit of Lead Belcher base, followed by a little bit of Nuln oil shade, and then possibly a little bit of Ironbreaker or Lead Belcher back again, just to add a little bit of highlight there on the high points. But we'll do those now, be back here again in a moment, and then we'll move on from there. This is our model now that we finished with the metallics. So we did the space inside of here where all the gears for the power pack are, as well as the coils here for the power pack. And then we also did the respirator coils on the head. And in the meanwhile, we're also going to do the brown colors that go here. So we're going to take a little bit of RHINOX hide, followed by a little bit of GORTHOR brown. And we're going to do the holster here on the side, as well as the satchel on this side over here. And we're also going to do whatever the fuel is in the fires here on the backpack. So we'll do that with a brown as well, and we'll get those finished, and then be back here in a few moments once that's done there. So this is our model now that we're finished with the browns and all the metallics, and what we're going to move on to now is the other key color of Thousand Suns, which is the yellow stripes that go in and amongst the Thousand Suns blue. So we're going to put a base of Averland Sunset, followed by a highlight of Yriel yellow. And we're going to very carefully pick out each of these lines, doing every second one in yellow to create the key Thousand Suns image, as well as the chest piece. Some radial ones on this shin guard here, and then any of the other ones around that we see. So we'll do those now and be back here in a few moments. See, here's our model now that we finished with the yellow. And as you can see, it's definitely getting that classic Thousand Suns appearance. So what we're going to do now is move over to the cloak, which we've been avoiding the whole time here, but now I think we're ready for. So what we're going to do is paint this a nice regal purple, and then bring it lighter and lighter until we get a nice pink color here, which will match kind of the Thousand Suns we've already painted. So what we're going to do here is put a base coat of Screamer Pink on it, so sort of 2 thin layers. And then after we finish that, what we're going to do is put a shade of Nuln oil on it, just to darken up the recesses there. So we'll do both of those now and be back here once that's done. And then we'll see what it looks like. So here's our model now that we finished with the Screamer Pink and the Nuln oil. And as you can see, we filled in some of these gaps here. We also did a dry brush of the Screamer Pink over the top again, just to clean up the highlights a bit. And so what we're going to do now is add another highlight to that. We're going to add a little bit of Pink Horror to it, and that'll just hit the very, very high points. So it's a very light dry brush. Same rule applies. The lighter the color, the less you need on the brush. So it'll be a very light dry brush, just hitting the high points. So we'll do that now and be back again in a few minutes to see what it looks like. So this is our model now that we finished with the Pink Horror highlight. And as you can see, we've added a nice layer effect to that. We're going to do one last dry brush over the top just to hit the very highest points because it's a very, very light color. But we're going to do a little bit of Emperor's Children, which is much lighter still. And just a tiny dry brush of that. Like I said, right over kind of this point here, maybe a couple over the top of the shoulder, more here, and then a little bit over there. So we'll do those now, and then we'll be finished this model for the time being. We still have the flames to do, but we're kind of holding the model by that. So we'll do that once we attach it to the base. So from that point there, we'll move on to the actual base and start coloring that right after we finish with this. So for the base, the first thing we're going to work on is the Screamers that are here. So what we're going to do with those is we're going to paint them first with a base color of KANTOR blue, and then we're going to dry brush on some CALGAR blue right over it, similar to what you do for an Ultramarine or Space Marine. In this case, we're going to do both of those, and then we're going to kind of taper that off there as it disappears off into the warp. So we'll do that and be back here in a few seconds now once the base and highlight is done. So there's our Screamers now that the blue is finished. And what we're going to do is a little bit of horns here, as well as the ones there, and a couple of the ones coming out the sides here. So we're going to do all those the same way we did on the bone on the helmet of the Marine himself. Just a little bit of Rakarth flesh, and then a highlight of Screaming Skull. You can put the Seraphim Sepia if you like. We probably don't need it. It's a very small object we're painting. So we'll do that now and be back here in a few minutes. So that's our Screamers now that we've added the horns. So what we're going to do now is take a little bit of Yriel yellow, which we had used before. And we're going to do the eyes of the Screamers, just to make them stand out a little bit. So just a fine dot with each one, just there, just to give it a bit more detail. And then we'll be back in a few more minutes. So that finishes up the Screamers. And what we're going to do now is start working on the aura cloud here, or the summoning cloud. So we're going to return it to base white, and then we'll start adding some shades to clean it up. So we'll do it with some white scar. While we're at it, we'll do some of the trailing clouds off the back of the Screamers. The warp trails, or the trails from the warp, or the summoning debris, whatever it is. We'll do all of that in white now, and then be back here in a few minutes. So this is our cloud now that we've brought it back to white with the white scar. What we're going to do now is add a shade, and we're going to use Nickelith Oxide. So we're going to put that generously over the entire thing. It'll fill in all the recesses. It'll clip off some of the other waves we added to the screamers here. So we'll do all that now and be back in a few minutes once that's dried. So here's our cloud after we've added the technical paint. So what we're going to do next is add a light highlight over the top of that. So we're going to use ULTHUAN Gray, which is a bluish shaded, a cold temperature gray. So there's a shade of blue in it. It'll blend very well with this. So we're just going to dry brush that right over the top and sort of bury most of the turquoise teal color here, but still leave the undercurrents of it. So we'll do that now. So this here's our model after we finish with the ULTHUAN Gray. And as you can see, we've really lightened up the swirl here. So with that finished, we're going to move on to the rock like we said. So the rock is going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to be probably a base color of Eshin Gray, followed by a dry brush of Dawnstone right around the edges, and that'll light up the edges there. So we'll do that now and be back in a few minutes. We'll probably take some time to put some Abaddon Black on the rest of the base, just to return it back to its original color. And then we'll be back here in a few minutes once that's done. We're now going to move on to the flames, and that's the last part of the model to do. So for these flames here, we're going to make them a reddish fire. So what we have to do there is return it back to white and then start adding some coats, more reddish as we go up toward the top. So the first thing we're going to do is paint it all white with white scar, same as we've used several times already. And then on top of that, we're going to add a glaze or a dry brush or a shade of Cassanadora Yellow. And what that'll do is it'll start our flame color and it'll fill in some of the recesses. So we'll do both of those and be back here in a few minutes once that's done. So here's our model after we've done the white and then the yellow shade. So what we're going to do now is before that dries, we're going to wet blend in some Troll Slayer Orange and just sort of blend it into sort of the middle section here. And then we'll put a bit of Wild Rider Red in the top half up here. And finally blend our way into some Corn Red at the very top up here, creating that three-tone effect coming up. So we'll do that now and be right back. So here's the fire now that it's finished. And you may have noticed that we also did a few other things on the scarab here and the one on the top of the helmet. And on the staff here, we used a little bit of Screaming Bell, which is another metallic, just to add a bit more of a copper color to these areas, just to bring that out a little bit more. So with that, we're going to glue all the model together, flock it, clear coat it, and then we should be finished, and we'll show you the final product in just a moment. So this here is our model of our Infernal Master now that we've completely finished. And we've clear coated and based him, and we've added some sand on the base there just to blend that in. So we're pretty happy with the way it turned out. And if you made one that looks similar to that, please feel free to leave a like or a comment. Let us know how it went. We'll put a few pictures of a couple of different angles. You can see the back and the size of the model right after this video. And aside from that, please feel free to subscribe if you want to. Let us know how you did if you followed the guide. And otherwise than that, we hope you have some fun on the tabletop, and we'll see you at our next painting video.